What is going on, Dark Souls 2 fans? Methodical Gamer here. Today I'm bringing you guys a build I've been working very hard on for the past week and a half. I've made a few videos leading up to this one on gathering the equipment for this build. So after 5 days of PvP and approximately 100 matches later, I'm ready to talk about this build. Let's get started. First, let's take a look at the Greatsword of Forlorn. This weapon has stat requirements in Strength, Dexterity, Intelligence, and Faith. This weapon deals damage in 3 different areas: Physical, Dark, and Bleed. This is important when keeping in mind of stat allocations for your build, because that will shape how this weapon deals damage in PvP. Going off of that, let's take a look at the parameter boost for the weapon under normal infusement. We have a C in Strength, a D in Dexterity, and a C in Dark. Even though the normal pathway of infusement is great, there is a better option for this weapon. I chose the pathway of Bleed. This did not affect my stat allocation as much as it did one ring slot and the mentality of how I play with this build. Because we are going with the pathway of Bleed for this weapon, let us go back and talk about the changes in stat allocation for the making of this build. Then we can look at the gameplay and see how this altered my use of the moveset of this weapon in PvP. First thing we do is look at the weapon for the base stat damage change and the change in parameter scaling. Surprisingly enough, between Bleed and normal infusement, Bleed has the higher number in base stat damage. And this is in all 3 disciplines of Strength, Dark, and Bleed. However, where this infusement pass suffers is in the physical damage output of this weapon. The strength scaling gets a bump from a C to a D, which means the physical damage will be less, but the good news is the weapon becomes more balanced in its damage output. Now, while we're on the topic of balance and parameter scaling, with the Bleed pathway of infusement, you drop from a C scaling to a B scaling in Dark. Now, this may not convince a lot of you. A lot of you may say, what if they're wearing a Dark Quartz ring? Or what if they're using Great Magic Barrier? Not only does that negate the infusement, but it makes your weapon weaker than initially started. But hold on just one second, there is one saving grace to the Bleed infusement of this weapon. So what is the upside of Bleed infusement? It's Bleed, of course. The Bleed takes a huge jump from the normal infusement. We go all the way from 140 to 218 Bleed damage. Now I can start talking about the moveset of the weapon and the ring slot replacement of this build. So by now you guys probably figured out what the purpose of this build is to make your opponent bleed out as quick as possible. By doing so, they have no stamina to attack you, no stamina to dodge you, and with less stamina than ever before, the fight's over before it even started. In the beginning, you probably saw my 4th ring slot allocation, and it was the Crest of Blood. The Crest of Blood offers about 50 extra bleed damage to the weapon. If it has previous imbuement, it's only 40, if not then 60, so this weapon technically only receives about 40 extra bleed damage, but that is significant when you're talking about a weapon that's got so much bleed stacked to it already. So now that we have the breakdown and understanding of the build, why I chose to allocate the points as I did, and how the weapon works, let's talk about the moveset mechanics. So how do you use this weapon? In short, use your R1s offensively. You always want to be 1 frame ahead of your opponent, dealing damage faster than they can you. That much is obvious. The R2s, however, are made for baiting your opponent. If you take a look at the R2s, you'll see how they're made to draw on opponents for the second attack. Something I mentioned in previous videos about baiting your opponent with R2s. You want to wait until the very last possible moment to activate that second R2. Alright, let's talk more specifically about the one-handed versus two-handed R2 attack animations. My general rule is when an opponent's hugging you close, use the two-handed R2, and when they're further away, use the one-handed R2. The reason is, much like the one we had with the baiting animation, is the importance is not in the first R2, but the second R2. Because the second R2 is the most important, that's the one you want to judge when you're choosing which animation you want to strike with, and how far you should be from your opponent when initiating the attack. The last thing to mention in the moveset is the cancel animation backstep R1. I use this against opponents who look like they don't have a good read on exactly what I'm doing, and it usually baits them into an R1 and they usually get punished for it. The cancel animation backstep R1 is easily followed up with an R1. You can score 2 easy strikes on your opponent, which is great when I'm trying to stack up bleed on my opponent. The very last thing to mention about this build, the Forlorn weapon itself scales with how hollow your character is. You may have noticed all the fights in this video take place in the arena, as well as an HP bar being full. No matter how hollow your character gets, you'll always get it back in the arena. For this sword to be at its peak performance, you'll need over half your HP missing, which is really sad because I don't see this build as being viable outside the arena. but if you're just like me and you like the players that are in the arena, this build's perfect. See you next time. Hey guys, thanks for watching this video. If you enjoy the content I'm bringing to you, don't forget to support my channel by hitting that like button. And if you haven't already, go ahead and click that subscribe button. That way you get a notification every time I post new content on my channel. I'm already working on my next build for this channel. It's going to be a good one. So until next time, remember to play smart and keep on winning.